If you're a superpower, act like a superpower. Allow your equipment, your capabilities to speak for themselves, not doing what he's doing.
Seems as 2025 finished, there was a very close and closer relationship building with Vladimir Putin. But then the latest peace deal, or the peace talks that have been going on between Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio getting involved with the Europeans and the Ukrainians and everything else, don't seem to have gone any closer to peace. Not because of concessions from Ukraine or enthusiasm from Europe and elsewhere, but because Vladimir Putin has once again gone no. Do you think Donald Trump is beginning to lose his patience with Putin?
I doubt it. That has been my hope all along, that he would finally realize that the Russians did not respect him, that they were mocking him, and that he was being played. I kept hoping that he would finally realize that and use the enormous leverage that he has over Russia. But how many times did we hear in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, and nothing has ever happened? Um, Now, I will be the first to stand up and say I was wrong if it turns out that I am wrong and that the president really is. This time, he's really serious. Uh, I'll believe it when I see sanctions on Russia being enforced, and the United States taking real steps to stop the flow of Russian oil and gas to China and India, and taking real steps to help make sure that not only can Ukraine defend itself, but that the United States plays a prominent role in whatever sort of security guarantees might come out. If he doesn't do any of those, then this will be nothing.
Well, it's interesting. America has just carried out a very audacious raid to get Maduro out of Venezuela, and the U.S. Secretary of State for War, Pete Hegseth, yesterday turned around and stood up in a press conference and almost mockingly mocked Russian air defenses and Chinese air defenses, saying that they're useless and we've proven them wrong. And the Russians had sent extra military capability to prop up Maduro and military advisors to help him prepare for any US operation. Yet Donald Trump seems to have ignored that and continued with his sort of support for Putin. How do you think he's balancing that off, giving two different messages out in two different areas?
Honestly, I'm not sure. It's inappropriate for the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Hegseth, to be mocking the Chinese and Russian air defense. If you're a superpower, act like a superpower. Allow your equipment, your capabilities to speak for themselves, not doing what he's doing. Now, there's no doubt that Russian equipment has not performed very well, whether you're talking about in Syria or against Ukrainians, or in even Armenia, uh, Iran, other places. So this has not been a good couple of years for the Russian defense industry. But it's also important to keep in mind before we get too excited about this. Um, the level of training and maintenance is just as important as the quality of the technology. And I'm not so sure that even the best Russian air defense system in the hands of Venezuelan or Cuban or Iranian air defenders is going to be, if that's a good assessment of the quality of what Russia might have for itself.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid point. People forget about the maintenance and the operation and the level of training and the preparation and all the rest of it. You might have a very big flashy thing. You might have a Formula One car sitting in your garage, but if you don't know how to drive it, you don't know how to maintain it, it's not going to last very long.
You're exactly right. And look, that's expensive. I mean, that's hard. I'm proud of one of the things that, even though American equipment that we may sell to other countries is very expensive and it takes too long to get there, it comes with the whole package, included the maintenance and training as well. So I'm not sure that people who purchase Russian-made equipment are getting that sort of package. That's why the S-400s that the Turks bought from Russia, they're still sitting in their shipping containers.
Do you think that's part of the reason why there's been so much difficulty in crossing that Rubicon and providing the Tomahawk cruise missiles to the Ukrainians? Because actually, it would require an awful lot of US direct involvement to ensure that they're properly targeted, to ensure that they're properly maintained, to ensure that they can properly be used, rather than just giving them to the Ukrainians and let the Ukrainians crack on with it.
Well, most countries, I would say that's true. The one country for sure that that would not be true is Ukraine. For some reason, people have continued to underestimate the ability of Ukrainians to take technologies and employ it quickly. It's something about well, of course, you'll remember that Ukraine was the heart of the Soviet Union's defense industry during all those years, and so there's still a residual engineering and technological excellence in Ukraine, which is part of the reason I think they've been so good here over the last several years with new technologies, adapting things, creating things, even while being bombarded by Russia. The Tomahawk is not new technology. I mean, if anybody could figure out a way to launch a Tomahawk off the back of a pickup truck or from any other platform, it'll be the Ukrainians. Certainly, the United States um, will be helping, I would hope, with targeting and those kinds of things. But otherwise, I don't. I would not hesitate to provide Tomahawk or Taurus. I mean, the Ukrainians are having no problem with Storm Shadow.
Yeah, well, Taurus is interesting. I personally think that one, the Germans don't have as many as they suggested to the German people that they had, and two, it may not be as reliable as they again had, or the German defense industry had suggested it was going to be to the German armed forces, which would be a very good reason for Chancellor Merz not to provide it, and to prove that it isn't as good as people have made it out to be.
Well, that could be. You may be better informed than I am on this, but I've not heard from any of my Bundeswehr friends that hey, the reason we're not doing it is because we don't want to be exposed. I think this is more about ch- yeah, Chancellor Merz is he heads up a very fragile coalition, and you've got the far left of the SPD has been against this from the beginning, and so he has to be mindful of impact of decisions on his coalition.
Well, talking of coalitions and coming together, we've just had the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the French President Emmanuel Macron sign a declaration yesterday agreeing to deploy troops after a peace deal. And this is again the coming together. Now it's interesting that it's the French and the British that have done this. The Germans haven't come in as well. Of course, the United States has said it will not put boots on the ground, but all of this is underpinned by two things. One, there actually being some form of peace deal, and two, there being some form of US backstop and security guarantee that the French, the British, and the rest of the coalition, the willing, can rely on. Do you think this is just political posturing at this stage? Because both of them will know that this is a red line for Vladimir Putin.
Well, look, I have to say, I'm a little bit weary of my European friends wringing their hands all the time and worrying about what Russia might do, and instead of using the collective power and wealth and populations and technology and industry and capabilities of all the nations of Europe, including UK and Norway, plus Canada, plus Ukraine. I mean, it dwarfs Russia, and so I think there's way too much whinging about, oh my God, the Russians will be unhappy or this might provoke them. Enough of that. Unfortunately, the United States is failing here to do what we should be doing. I mean, this war should have ended if the United States had committed, even during the last administration, to helping Ukraine win. We didn't do it, and so here we are. And I think, while I hope that the United States will be part of some sort of guarantee, because it's in our interest that this works out, um, Europe has to be prepared to do this without much American participation. Now, while what came out of yesterday was certainly not going to be decisive or enough, I was encouraged that we at least got to that point with the UK and France providing the leadership. Um, Obviously, there's more to follow, but I put myself in the shoes of whoever will be the commander of this thing. And my first question is, okay, what is my mission? What what am I supposed to accomplish? I mean, if you're talking about some British and French troops sitting at a training area by Lviv, that's not going to do anything to deter Russia from violating whatever agreement there is. So it has to be a very clearly defined task for or mission for this force, what they're supposed to accomplish, and they have to be enabled with the capabilities to accomplish that mission. And that really means having real credible force that could inflict pain on Russians that might ever violate whatever the agreement is. And that also means there will have to be rules of engagement that will allow the commander to immediately respond to whatever violations inevitably are going to happen. Without that, the Russians will see that this is an actually empty bottle.
You've been watching Frontline with me, Philip Ingram. If you'd like access to exclusive content, please subscribe to Times Radio membership and watch us on YouTube. But you can now get us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. And don't forget, you can also listen to Times Radio for the latest updates on global affairs and read about them at thetimes.com. Thank you.